All right. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to another exciting daily vlog. This is daily vlog number 190. And today, we're not going to talk about how I'm doing. You can guess if you would like, because I am wearing my emotional support ninjetti outfit. What I do want to talk about, I need a drink. Hold, please. I need a drink. All right, much better. All right. What I do want to talk about today is I want to talk about Final Fantasy XIV and the problems that I have had with the Dawntrail main story quest. If just overall spoiler warning, I'm not going to go into any specific details about plot points, but I am going to talk basically kind of how they constructed the main story quest, and I'm going to focus on one of the characters in the main story quest that was introduced during the very last patch before the expansion, and how it is a massive departure from what Final Fantasy XIV storytelling has been for the past 10 or 11 years. And how that relates to writing stories for tabletop RPGs, because I have this link that I want to make. So, yes, if you're worried about spoilers for Final Fantasy XIV's Dawntrail main story quest, like I said, I'm not going to be going over plot points, but I am going to be going over just how they kind of constructed it. So there will be some minor spoilers. Feel free to skip this if you want to avoid that. Overall, I have been enjoying the expansion. It's just I haven't been enjoying the story of the expansion. I've been enjoying just about everything else. But for a game that I would sell to most people as, oh, the story is amazing, having it just miss so hard on the story for this one is upsetting. So, again, minor spoiler alert. I don't want anyone getting mad saying, like, how could you say that? You totally ruined it for... Spoiler alert. All right, now we're getting to slightly spoilery details. At the end of the last expansion, the final patch, I think it was like 6.5, I think was the final patch. Well, let's go back a little bit further. Some minor spoilers for the Endwalker storyline. The Endwalker storyline, which was the last expansion, was basically tying up the loose ends that had been started with even before Realm Reborn, the reimagined Final Fantasy XIV. The basic conflict throughout the story has been the player character, who's referred to as the Warrior of Light, in conflict with this group of people called the Ascians, which you don't really find out a ton about them until you get to Shadowbringers, which was... you have Dawntrail now, just before that was Endwalker, just before that was Shadowbringers. So, Shadowbringers, you actually start finding out who the Ascians are, and you find out why it is that they want to, as far as you're aware, destroy the world. They are the big bad evil guys, and they keep doing these things that should create this kind of worldwide destruction. And again, without getting too spoiler in it, they actually do have a reason why they want to destroy the world, and it's effectively... It's a relatively common big bad end guy motivation. It's the reboot motivation. It's like, well, we're going to destroy the world so that we can restart it the right way, the way that it's supposed to be. And there's a lot of really compelling reasons as to why they're viewpoint makes a lot of sense. It's still the wrong thing, but it's a very logical wrong thing to do. So Shadowbringers dealing with one of the ways that they're just deciding to do that. Endwalker deals with the results of them failing. And it was a really cool expansion, but the kind of driving force behind all these expansions is it is the Warrior of Light and his friends against the bad guys. And it's not always the Ascians, but the Ascians just keep showing up over and over again as the people kind of pulling the strings behind it. Like Heaven's Ward, there was this entire, like the whole plot of Heaven's Ward is dealing with the Knights of the Round, effectively. And their corruption and that, and you know, the idea of identification with and loyalty to a corrupt system versus doing what is actually right and good and things like that. But you find out that the Ascians were pulling a few strings behind that. And then we get to the next one, and it's about rebellion and colonization and the evils behind that. And again, the main plot doesn't involve the Ascians, but you find out that they're pulling strings behind the scenes and are causing a lot of the conflicts to come to a head. The conflicts already exist, but they always are coming to a head. And the through point of all of these stories is it's always the Warrior of Light gets help from their friends, but the Warrior of Light is the main character. The Warrior of Light is the one that's doing everything. The Warrior of the Light, which is your player character, is the hero. And there are other people, like the Scions of the Seventh Dawn is effectively what's referred, the group term for all the friends that show up repeatedly, and everybody loves them. I love them. My personal favorite, I love Thancred. I think he's the coolest dude ever. In A Realm Reborn, he was voiced by Taliesin Jaffe, and I think Taliesin did an amazing job. And then for Heaven's Ward, they went with a completely different voiceover company, and they recast everybody. And the new Thancred has been a little bit hit or miss. In Dawntrail, it has been miss after miss after miss. Like, I have been really, really impressed with just how bad his voice actor has done, because his voice actor has done tremendously good for nearly a decade now, and this was just horribly done over and over again. But I digress. So it's not that this is the Warrior of Light show and nobody else matters. He is constantly getting help from his friends. And they introduce new ones every so often. Grahatia is one that actually is introduced in the patches after A Realm Reborn, and then shows up later due to stuff that I won't reveal. And he's another one of my absolute favorite characters. So it's not like they're incapable of having side characters show up and become extremely important and integral to the plot. But it always goes back to the idea of the hero of light is the hero. The Warrior of Light is the hero. They're the ones that this is their story. And when we get to Dawntrail, the final patch before Dawntrail, in Endwalker, the expansion before did a Dawntrail, they finished the story they wanted to tell at the end of Endwalker. And the way that things normally work is the patch will launch and then you will finish the story, but there'll be kind of like a trailer for, well, what happens next? What happens next? And then each patch moving up to the next expansion will kind of lead into the next expansion and show you that, yeah, you fixed this, but there are bigger things to come. Well, Endwalker ended that. The story ended at the end of the main story quest in the base thing. And the patch main story quest was a side story where you go to basically the Abyss, if you're familiar with D&D in general. You go to the Abyss where all the dark things are, and you have this entire really awesome story dealing with stuff there. They introduce a new character named Zero, whom I adore, and my biggest gripe about that is we never got access to her armor, because her armor is freaking amazing. And if we do have access to her armor and I just didn't realize it, put it in the comments down below, because I want it for my Reaper. Especially since the Reaper outfit for Dawntrail is gross. I hate it so much. There were some weird armor choices for Dawntrail, let me tell you. And so that took 4 patches. And they buttoned that story up really nice and complete, and it was over. The 5th patch, the one right before, they introduced this new character. The character's name is Wook Lamut. And she is a female Hrothgar. The Hrothgar are kitty people. And they were added, I want to say Hrothgar were added in Shadowbringers, I think. It's either Shadowbringers or Endwalker. But they were added fairly recently, but they were a male-only race. You couldn't be a lady Hrothgar. They had also introduced the Viera, which are bunny people. But they were lady-only race. So you had Hrothgar for boys and a Viera for girls. And that was it. Well, Dawntrail comes out and they announce, yeah, you can play as Lady Hrothgar. And I can't remember if Bunny Boys was introduced in Dawntrail or if it was introduced in the patch before. But now you have both genders, both race. So Wook Lamut is a female Hrothgar, which is fine. And she's coming, the plot of Dawntrail is you go to the New World. It is heavily, heavily inspired by Aztec and Mayan mythology and Mexican and Latin America heritage. It's an interesting idea for a plot. In fact, one of the kind of driving forces of the main story quest, slight spoiler alert, is you're looking for the legendary City of Gold. Which is, if I remember correctly, is an Incan legend. It's Incan folklore. It's either Incan or Mayan. I confuse those two cultures up often, which is horrible because they are two very, very different cultures. And I don't think they even existed the same. I can't remember. My history is really, really bad. But anyway, so Wook Lamut has basically come from the New World to the Old World to find people to help her with this thing. Her father is the ruler of the New World, effectively. He has allied all the different kingdoms there into one unified country. And she is one of the possible successors, and she's looking for people to basically travel with her for this succession rite. That she doesn't know what it's going to be at this point, but she knows that not only is she allowed to have helpers with her, she encourages it. And so you do a little short adventure with her in the Old World. She goes, hey, I really like you guys. Would you guys mind being my companions for this? And you all go, yes. And that's where everything changes. As I mentioned before, the thing about Final Fantasy XIV is the Warrior of Light is the main character. They are the one that is driving the plot forward, and it shows in how everybody reacts to you. Like any time a new patch or a new something starts out and you go to a new place, people go, wait a minute, you're the Warrior of Light. You did reference this big climactic battle from the last expansion. You helped save Ishgard, or you helped defend these people from this, or you killed, all of the giant things that were trying to kill us, and you protected this, and you saved my uncle, and like you're a big, big deal constantly. And one of the interesting things about Shadow Walker was the fact that you get basically transported to an alternate dimension. And nobody knows who you are. And it was kind of a really refreshing thing where you still got to be the hero without all of your previous accolades following you. By the end, you are still considered the hero, although they call you the Warrior of Darkness in their whole plot point there. But you're always the hero. when we get to Dawntrail, you aren't the hero. You're a minor character in Wook Lamut's story. And what I mean by that is, everything in the main story quest, and I haven't finished it yet. I'm near the end. I max leveled my character. I got the Viper job as soon as it was available, got it to 90, and then started doing the main story quest as a Viper. Viper is a super, super fun class. It's a basically longsword wielding class that can slap them together to make a sword staff. It's super cool. I love it. And it's actually lots of fun to play too. So what's happening is the whole first half of the plot of the main story quest is, again, you have basically signed on to be Wook Lamut's helpers in her journey to hopefully become the next ruler of this country. And it is apparent that you are a side character in this story. Every time you go anywhere, people talk to Wook Lamut. They barely ever reference you. Anytime something big happens, Wook Lamut is the one that gets the final blow, is the one that makes the inspiring speech, is the one that gets all the credit for it. You are literally just her lackey through the entire main story quest. And there are even points where you know significantly more than she does in quite a few different subjects, because again, you are the you're the warrior of light. You have saved the world over and over and over again. And just because you are in a different continent, nobody knows who you are. Nobody references anything, which is, again, perfectly fine. They did the exact same thing when they sent you to a different dimension. But nobody cares about your character. Which, again, it may sound kind of arrogant. It's like, well, nobody cares about me. Why can't somebody else be in the spotlight? Because it's a video game. And the point of the video game is you're the hero. That's the entire point of playing a video game, is you get to be the hero. And I can't help but be reminded, a while back I talked about the difference in storytelling between World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy XIV. And the big difference in World of Warcraft versus Final Fantasy XIV is, in World of Warcraft, you are an adventurer. In Final Fantasy XIV, you are the adventurer. You are the main character. All of the major plot points happen because you did them. Whereas Final Fantasy XIV, so Final Fantasy XIV, everything happens because you did it. In World of Warcraft, you happen to be there when one of the Warcraft main characters actually does something. If you look at, killing, what was his name? Is it Dreadwing, the Destroyer? That's his name. Big fuck all dragon that's trying to destroy the world because he's mad. The final raid of that expansion has you literally skydiving onto this dragon's back, fighting your way up, and trying to kill this massive dragon that's just trying to destroy the world. However, when you beat the raid, you want to know who gets the killing blow? Thrall. The character that was introduced in Warcraft 3 and eventually became the war chief of the Horde, of the new Horde, after it was broken from its enslavement to Kel'Thuzad. Thrall uses an item that combines the other dragon aspects powers into a single beam of light, and he kills the big bad end guy. If you go to, like, one of my favorite expansions for World of Warcraft was Legion. Because the Burning Legion, which is all the demons in existence, belong to this organization called the Burning Legion. The reason they're called the Burning Legion is they go across space and just wipe out planets. They go there, they burn them to a crisp, go to the next one. And they've been trying to get to Azeroth for centuries, but Azeroth has had this thing called the Guardian, whose entire purpose was to kick the shit out of the Burning Legion without anyone else finding out. And eventually, one of the Guardians got cocky, decided that they wanted to choose who was going to be the next Guardian instead of the Council of Tarissifal. Had a kid in secret, gave her Guardian powers to the kid. Well, the Guardian powers exploded when the kid wasn't ready. He ended up killing a bunch of people and then got corrupted by dark magic, and that's where Medivh came from. And that's the whole plot of the original Warcraft and then Warcraft 2, is the fact that Medivh betrayed humanity and Azeroth to ally with the Burning Legion. So the leader of the Burning Legion, the thing that has been the driving force behind the entire Warcraft lore since the beginning, is this fallen titan, basically mega god. And you finally get to fight him. And who gets the killing blow? Illidan, a character that was introduced in Warcraft 3, gets the killing blow. And this happens over and over and over. The expansion that you go to death, you don't get to kill the bad guy. I can't remember who does it, but it's one of the main characters. It's not your character. You are always a side story. You are always a side character in Blizzard's story. They have their main characters that they really like, and they are the ones that get to do everything awesome. You just kind of get to be there when they do it. Another really good example, you're fighting the Lich King, the basically master commander of all the undead in the world. It is an amazingly awesome raid. At the end of the raid, what happens? Arthas the Lich King does this thing and freezes the entire raid in ice. So you have beaten the raid effectively. That's what's happened here is you have actually beaten the boss. And the end result is your character is frozen and another character has to come in and kill the Lich King for you. This is what happens in every single Warcraft expansion. And even in the base game, everything is about someone else winning, someone that Blizzard writes. And I liken that to tabletop RPGs with the idea that Blizzard is basically a bad DM. And what I mean by that is they have written a story that they let your characters play in, but the real hero of that story is their DMPC, who's always the most powerful. They're generally not there for most of the battle, but they'll come in at the very end to get the final blow, and they're the ones that are always acknowledged as being the heroes. You just help the heroes. And that's effectively what happens in Dawntrail. Wook-Lamut is the one that does everything, to the point where there is a boss battle in there where your character doesn't participate. None of the characters participate except Wook-Lamut. And it actually happens 2 different times. The first time, you actually get to control Wook-Lamut, which has happened a few other times. Like one of my favorite ones was there was a subplot in Shadowbringers where Thancred was attempting to protect this reincarnation, effectively, of one of his friends. And it's hinted that there was kind of a love interest between them long time ago. So she's a young child now, so there's no love interest, but there's a very kind of paternal bond there where he's like, I'm going to protect you. And this one dude just keeps targeting this girl that he's protecting. And it finally comes to a head where it's like, we're going to fight this guy. And Thangren goes, no, you're not. I'm going to fight this guy. And again, it's kind of a side story for the main plot, because the main plot is you're dealing with these other things. But this dude just keeps coming back, and he has a personal thing against Thancred. And so you do get to play as Thancred for an entire fight. And it's massively fun. It is a super, incredibly fun thing to do. But again, it's a side story. And I think that in and of itself is good storytelling, because you create these really amazing, interesting characters, and then you give them their own plot lines, and you allow them to resolve those plot lines, but you still allow the player character to be the hero. So it's not like this has never been done before. However, it's never been done in a way that your character is so much of a side character that they're barely referenced at all. Like, Wook Lamut has to literally force everyone you talk to acknowledge that the player character exists, because everybody only cares about Wook Lamut. Now, again, she is the daughter of the ruler of the Empire, and she's beloved across the Empire. So it makes sense that she would be more famous than you. But nothing, no matter what you do, throughout the entire main story quest, and again, I'm not at the very end yet, so it's possible things change at the very end and I just haven't gotten there. But no matter what you do, you help take out some really, really horrible things. You help bring to light some horrible things that have happened and help fix them. And Wook Lamut is the one that gets all of the credit for it. And again, there's two big fights against really, really big baddies in this, and both of them, it is exclusively Wook Lamut. One of them you get to control Wook Lamut, which again is fun, but not great. The second one is just a cutscene where Wook Lamut basically spanks this guy royally. And there's nothing, you just have to sit there and watch. And that's exactly what Blizzard does every time. Every time something important happens in the kind of lore of World of Warcraft. Up until the important point, you will get to play. But as soon as the important point comes around, they cut to black, switch to a cutscene, and you watch someone else do the cool thing. Someone else kills the Lich King. Someone else kills the leader of the Shadowlands. Someone else imprisons the head, deals the final blow to the head of the Burning Legion. It's always someone else. You are never the hero in World of Warcraft. And for whatever reason, they decided that for Dawntrail, they didn't want you to be the hero. They wanted to introduce this new character, who's an interesting character. Don't get me wrong. I like Wook Lamut. I don't think they're a bad character. And some people are claiming that Wook Lamut is effectively a Mary Sue. And it doesn't really fit. If anyone, if you're not familiar with the term, or you've heard the term a lot, but you've kind of just written it off as like misogyny, it is a real thing. And basically the definition of a Mary Sue is basically this nothing character, this unimportant character that somehow becomes the most important character in the entire established universe. If I remember correctly, it came from a fan fiction that was written by this person that basically it was a Star Trek fan fiction, and their character was just this random ensign, but their random ensign was smarter than Spock, was a better leader than Kirk, and this is the original series Star Trek fan fiction. Was a better engineer than Scotty. Like, she was better at everything than everyone else. And all of the main characters from the original series were fawning over her, thought she was the most amazing person ever. That's what a Mary Sue is. It's an unimportant person that seems to be perfect, never has to work for their accomplishments. They are just naturally gifted to be the best at everything. And the big thing about it is all of the characters The way that a Mary Sue works is it has to be a character that is inserted to a fiction that already exists. Because one of the defining features of the Mary Sue is all the characters that everybody else that loves that fiction loves are enamored with this new character for really no reason. And that's what makes Mary Sue's bad. They're bad writing. They don't have any growth for the character at all. There's no kind of personal growth. There's no character story arc or anything. They're just the best at everything. And they are effectively the deus ex machina that fixes everything simply by the fact that they are super awesome and amazing. And they never fail. They never have anything that goes wrong unless the thing that goes wrong shows how awesome they are. Wook Lamut does not really fit into the idea of a Mary Sue. Because first of all, she's not a nobody. She is, for lack of a better term, she's the princess. She is not just the daughter of the most beloved ruler in the history of this country. She is also in line for the throne. For again, it's more complicated than that, but she's not like, you know, the third child that is so far off from the throne that they're not going to get it unless a bunch of other people die in some strange things. No, she's in direct line for the throne, along with the other candidates, some of which are related to her, some of which aren't. All of them are technically in direct line for the throne. So she's not a nobody. She is already very well known in the world before we got involved. She's also not instantly loved by all the characters that we like. In fact, all the characters that we like, the Signs of the Seventh Dawn, are still very used to deferring to the Warrior of Light because that's what they've always done. And at this point, the Signs of the Seventh Dawn have gotten so comfortable with each other that they don't even kind of acknowledge the Warrior of Light as the quote-unquote leader. Every single one of them knows what they're good at. Every single one of them knows what they're not good at. And so there isn't really a hierarchy. They just kind of go, hey, I can do that. And they always check in with the Warrior of Light because the Warrior of Light, being the player character, is good at everything. So, and has taken 10 years to get to that point. So the characters that we all love think Wook Lamut is great. But most of that comes from them traveling with Wook Lamut and seeing the personal growth that Wook Lamut goes through over her journey. So it's not like the character is badly written. It's not a Mary Sue. But the fact that the player character is a side character in his own game is really not fun. Like, I am having the hardest time I've ever had getting myself through the main story quest, to the point where I have literally considered just stopping doing the main story quest to go back and level my Gunbreaker. Because my Gunbreaker is the class that or the job that I've been using for the past 2 expansions, and I really like it. It's a tank, and it uses a gunblade. It uses a sword that has a trigger that makes it explode when it hits things. It doesn't get cooler than that, folks. I love gunblades. I think they're the coolest things ever. And so one of the reasons why, as much as everybody hates Final Fantasy VIII, I love it. I think it's a great game. I don't think it is the greatest Final Fantasy, but I don't think it deserves the hate that a lot of people give to it. And again, it introduced the gunblade, and gunblades are super cool. So, this is the first time that's ever happened. And it annoys me because, again, it feels like the writing team for Dawntrail, I don't know if they took inspiration from World of Warcraft or they imported people from Blizzard or something, but the writing style has changed so drastically in this. And again, I understand that they're trying to start a new kind of through plot for the campaign because they ended the story of Final Fantasy XIV. They ended it at the end of Endwalker. That was the whole point of Endwalker. It was the end of the story, and it was a great ending. It was super, super cool. I loved it. But now they're trying to start a new kind of major arc. And I just don't think they're doing a good job of it. Because again, to me it feels like my character is just along for the ride. Nothing I do seems to really matter. It's all about Wook Lamut. Which again, I would be okay with that if it weren't for the fact that I'm not Wook Lamut. I'm the Warrior of Light. And again, I play this game to be the hero. I play this game to be the central character in this story. The reason that you do this. And it just, like, even the rest of the signs of the Seventh Dawn are constantly put on the back burner. And again, these are really, really cool characters. Again, Thancred is a gunbreaker. And if you want to watch one of the greatest cinematic cutscenes that have ever been created, watch the trailer for Shadowbringers for Final Fantasy XIV. It is so amazingly cool. You don't even have to it won't make a ton of sense if you haven't played the game or at least watched the other cutscenes, because it is a culmination of story points. But even if you don't know anything that's going on, it's just a badass scene. And it starts off with the Warrior of Light fighting against what looks like an angel. Comes down from the heavens, starts beating the snot out of the Warrior of Light. And the Warrior of Light just transitions through a bunch of different jobs while doing that. Well, intercut with that, you see what's happening with the other characters of the Sign of Seven Dawn. And Thancred's section is, you see him in some kind of underground place in a staircase. You hear him say something effective, "I won't let anything bad happen to you, Minfilia." And that's a big reveal that everybody was, whoa, amazing. And it cuts to a bunch of people, and then it comes back. There is a giant winged, like, bear lion thing made of marble that's trying to kill this little girl that Thancred's trying to protect. And it lunges at him, and you watch him take his gun blade and just go shoo, kerpoof, and he blows off one of the wings. He jumps into the air. He opens up the gun blade because it's a revolver style gun with a big old sword attached to it. He breaks it open, takes out the spent shells, put a bunch of new spent shells in, clicks it in, and then dives in, does this cool spinning slash. Thancred is freaking amazing. And he went from being a rogue, which is dual-wielding knife dude, to Gunbreaker when Shadowbringers came out. And he was super, super cool and amazing. If you watch the trailer for Endwalker, there's this scene where one of the characters, Alice, she's a red mage. Red mage are sword mages. She has a rapier, and she also has this little like thing that she holds here, so she can fight with the rapier. And then what she'll do is she'll flip it around, put the crystal thing on the top of the rapier, and use it to cast spells. And so she's fighting this weird giant lizard thing, and she gets attacked. And the Warrior of Light comes in, deflects the second attack that's about to kill her, and kind of cuts off the dude's tail, and you see Warrior of Light is a paladin. He looks really cool. And then lasers start coming in from nowhere, and you see these little kind of remote control drones almost coming in and just going... And you watch as Alphino, who's Alice's brother, twin brother, comes in as the new Sage class, which is a healer that heals with lasers, guys. And he comes in, does all this cool stuff, goes and heals his sister, and then gets into this really cool fighting stance, saving both the Warrior of Light and his sister at the same time. So it's not like these are inept characters. They're really badass, amazing characters. Another one, Estinian, is a Dragoon that shows up. He showed up as an antagonist in the Dragoon class quest in A Realm Reborn, the first version of Final Fantasy XIV. And then eventually becomes an ally later on. And he's this massively awesome Dragoon character. And he does things like he will jump into the sky, because that's what Dragoons do in Final Fantasy, is they jump into the sky and they plunge down with these spears, and then explosions follow. Dragoon is super, super fun to play. I've leveled up a Dragoon, I think, to level 80 or 90. They're awesomely fun. There are scenes of him in the game taking down dozens of dragons by going into the sky and doing this plunge to the earth with this massive energy wave following him. So Wooklamut has all of these amazingly powerful people that have literally saved the world. And it's barely acknowledged throughout, except for, I think, one scene where basically everyone is split up trying to defend multiple places from kind of an invasion style thing. You finally get to see them generally for about 5 to 10 seconds apiece get to do something cool. Throughout the entire rest of the campaign, they are just dead weight. You almost feel like you're slowing down Wooklamut throughout the entire thing, and that's just not how Final Fantasy XIV has been for 10 years. You've always been the hero. And again, it's not the idea of, me just being, well, I want to be the hero. No one's else allowed to see the world but me. It's not that. It's the idea that you have gone from the main character to not just a side character, a minor side character that is barely referenced throughout the entire game, aside from being a sounding board for Wooklamut to show how much they've grown. So again, it's not that I don't like the story that Wooklamut goes through. It's the fact that we are such a passive part of that story that it's just not fun. I don't want to watch somebody else have fun. I want to be the important person in this game. It's one of the reasons that I don't play World of Warcraft anymore. I get a lot more joy out of it because I still follow World of Warcraft and I still try to keep up with the story, but I read synopses and stuff like that because it's almost the exact same experience as playing World of Warcraft from a lore perspective, because your character doesn't matter. It really doesn't. The characters that do matter are Thrall over and over and over again. Thrall has been put on the sidelines and then brought out at the most important times so many times that it's a trope now. Malfurion used to have that same thing where he would just show up randomly and do amazing things. Jaina's done that quite a few different times. Who are the other ones that just over and over and over again? The new king of the humans. I can't remember his name. He was a priest, and then they eventually kind of turned him into a Death Knight. He shows up constantly and saves the day over and over and over again. It's like your character doesn't really matter, and that's kind of what it feels like for Final Fantasy XIV right now, is that my character doesn't really matter. If I hadn't been involved in this, Wooklamut is so good at what she does that she could have really picked anybody else to be her helpers. And as long as they were competent, which there's lots of competent people in the new world. It's not like it's an entire world. It's called Tyrol, by the way. In Tyrol, it's not like the entire country is just a bunch of kind of misfits that are incapable of, saving themselves and have to rely on some kind of savior. It's not what it is. There's a lot of really, really competent, amazing people that show up throughout the main story quest. And I just feel like a third wheel. It feels like everything I do is completely pointless because there are so many other people that could have done the exact same thing that I do that it doesn't really matter. And that's upsetting. And I get they were probably trying to avoid what's referred to as the white savior, which is basically where someone with pale skin goes to another country where they don't understand any of the ideals or anything, and suddenly becomes the best at whatever that country is good at. They become the best warrior, the best thing, and because of their enlightened perspective, they are able to save that country from civil war or an invasion or something like that. Like, it's a really, really common trope in Western media for decades, probably close to a century, and even before that, in fiction in general, going back hundreds of years, the idea of the person from civilized society going to save the savages and things like that. It's a really negative stereotype, and it kind of paints specifically kind of white European culture as kind of not only the pinnacle of culture, but also just significantly better than everyone else. So much so that they can go to another country, learn their ways, and then improve upon it because white European culture is just better than everything. So I can understand that they probably wanted to avoid the white savior, despite the fact that this is a Japanese game. And that's not a trope that Japanese culture really fears. Like the idea of the isekai, a character from a completely different culture that's just kind of slammed into this new world and suddenly becomes the best at everything, is an extremely common trope. Anime and manga is full. It's an entire genre of anime and manga is isekai, where you have someone from modern Tokyo gets thrown into a fantasy world, or and then they just become the best at everything. So yeah, like I can understand if maybe they were trying to avoid the white savior stereotype, but our characters aren't white. They're all Japanese because it's a Japanese game made for Japanese people that just happens to be really popular everywhere because it's an amazing game. And Yoshi P is phenomenally good at what he does. So yeah, it's just... And there are better ways to avoid the white savior trope than making the character that could have become the white savior just completely pointless. Like, the way that you fix that is you acknowledge the actual truth of the matter, which is different cultures have different ways of doing things. And a lot of times, both ways, the vast majority of times, both ways work perfectly fine. And it's when you learn from another culture's methodology and inspirations that your own culture can grow. So the easiest way to get around the white savior trope is to have them interact with a culture and understand the nobility and the benefits that and the lessons that culture has learned that their culture just hasn't figured out yet. Because that is 100% real. There are aspects of almost every culture in the world. There's a few cultures that I'll go, maybe we don't need to learn anything from them. But every culture in the world has, the ones that have existed for hundreds, sometimes thousands of years, the reason they've lasted that long is they work. And they have a system that works. And if you learn from that system, there's a lot that you can learn and you can use to help yourself grow. And that's a really, really great way to avoid the white savior stereotype, while not creating a character that's just a side character in somebody else's story. So, anyway, I am almost done with the main story quest. I am pushing myself as hard as I can to get through it. I'm in the final area. I'm doing everything I can to get through it because I'm hoping that there's some sort of payoff at the end here. Because, yeah, I get what they were doing. I think they just did it really, really badly. Like, I kid you not, every single time you enter a new area, the first, 4 or 5 quests in that area are, here, let me take you around to every place in the area. Without fail. And again, that's perfectly fine if the first time you get to the new hub city, they take you around. That happens in almost every expansion. But literally every single time you come to a new area, It is here, let me show you around. And they're the most mind-bogglingly dull quests that you can make, because it's literally just go to this place, push a single button, read a wall of text. Go to the next place, push a single button, read a wall of text. And some of the lore is interesting. Most of the lore is pointless, because either it's talking about stuff that they're never going to reference ever again, because it's basically just like, well, Timmy and Molly were having an argument, but they're okay now. Or it's talking about the history of this culture that, again, once you're out of this area, nobody gives a shit about. Not that, the players don't care about it. This story does not give a flying fuck about any area that you leave. Once you're done with it, you're done. And you never reference it again, with a few very rare exceptions. Like there is a scene where they make reference to all the things that we learned along the way. And that's really it. Like I had completely forgotten about it. And it had only been a couple of days since I've been doing it in kind of short spurts because of how sick I've been. I had completely forgotten about what we did in the first area. It was just one of those things that's like, oh, yeah, totally forgot about it, because it was never referenced again. The people that live there, because each different area is populated by a different fantasy race. Like one of them are owlbears. They're not technically up, but they 100% are. They're owlbears that stand on two legs. Fight me on this. They're 100% owlbears. And they're like, there's a culture of bunny people, and there's a culture of tiger people or kitty people. There's a culture of weird giant things that look like their faces melted off. But each different place, and then there's the lizard people culture. Each different place is populated generally by a single race. Which again, perfectly fine. That's kind of a fantasy trope. That I don't have a problem with, because it's a real thing that happens. We tend to stick with the people that look like us. It's not me bashing on diversity or anything like that. It's a common human thing that when we see something that looks familiar, we tend to cling to it. That's how it works. And it's true of, I think, just about every species in existence. Is we see stuff that looks like us and we go, we should probably stick around these people, or these things, because they look familiar to us. So I don't have a problem with that. But yeah, I completely forgot about the owlbear people. I forgot that they even existed in here, because they were introduced in Heaven's Ward, and they were minor characters in Heaven's Ward that I didn't care about. And then they introduced a new version of them that has rainbow feathers, so they're a completely different species. And again, I couldn't care less about them. They're not a race that player characters can be, and we don't have any companions that are from that group. So once we left there, completely forgot about them. Which again is not good storytelling. If you're going to spend all this time teaching me about the lore and the history of this group, and then go, okay, well, now that you're done with this area because you settled a minor problem that they were having, we're never going to reference them again. It's not good storytelling. Keep bringing them up. Have them add another person to our party. That kind of Journey to the West style thing, where as you're traveling, you just keep picking up travel companions. Even if that particular person just doesn't ever interact in combat, just adding them to the retinue and adding them to the party would have made me remember, oh yeah, we help these people and these are their cultural values. And during cutscenes in that, they could kind of chime up and go, well, where I'm from, this is what we would do. And it would be a really good, like, everyone's getting all mad about how they're trying to force diversity into this thing. I don't really see it. Like, the story that people are claiming is this woke ideology thing is not really that. It's a story that has been told over and over and over again, which is the idea of the sheltered princess goes out amongst her people and realizes that she has a lot to learn, and learns from the cultures of the peasants, effectively. That story has been told so many times. I mean, it's in Aladdin, basically. So no, I don't think it's like woke garbage or anything like that. Again, I haven't gotten to the end of this story, so maybe I'm missing a big point, but But again, it's just done so incredibly poorly because it's like, oh, I learned this amazing thing and now I've forgotten about all of you and I'm going to pretend that it's my idea. That's not an okay thing to do. It's bad storytelling, it's bad writing. And again, the one thing that Final Fantasy XIV, above everything else, it's a great game, don't get me wrong, but the thing above everything else that it does better than literally any other RPG I've ever played is the storytelling. They're masters at it. They're so good, and this falls so flat. Again, maybe at the end of this, there's going to be a really, really good hook that just makes me pumped. And I'm actually really excited. There's a raid series that's going to be referencing Final Fantasy XI, which I'm really excited about. But the raid series and stuff like that are almost always side stories. A lot of them are really, really good. Like for Stormblood, they did an entire raid series that was inspired by Final Fantasy Tactics, and it's by far the best raid series. Probably one of the best storylines in the entire game. It is so amazingly good. So yeah. Anyway, that's just what I've been thinking about. And again, it was one of those things that, from a tabletop, to bring this back to tabletop RPG, they've basically inserted a DMPC. Woke Lamont is a DMPC. The DM has decided that this is the story that they want to tell, and in order for the story to be told the way that they want it, they've created their own hero that is going to be the hero of this story, and you guys are just there along for the ride. And that is 100% always the wrong way to run a game in general. I am currently running 3 different campaigns. The campaigns that I run, I have been told, this is not coming from me, this is coming from my players, I've been told are very, very creatively fulfilling for the players. I had one person that had to drop out of the game. And I said, okay, that's perfectly fine. They they became a nurse, and if anybody is unaware, when you are a nurse, you don't get free time. Like, you just don't. You work 18-hour shifts. Nurses are so incredibly overworked, and they're amazing, wonderful people. But they went from nursing school to being a nurse. And it's a huge, huge thing. So they said, hey, I'm really sorry, but unfortunately, I have to work on the nights that we do this. I'm like, oh, this is totally fine. This is a game. That's real life. And you're literally saving people's lives. Don't feel bad about this. He's like, so what's going to happen to my character? I said, well, we'll come up with a way to kind of write them out of the story without killing them, so that maybe later on you are able to take Wednesdays off and you can play with us. So we're just gonna find a way to kind of put them over here. And as we were discussing this, the player goes, I'm really happy about this because I have never been as attached to a character as I am to this character. And I've been so happy to see where it goes and everything like that, that I really don't want to leave, and I don't want this character to just be forgotten. I said, they're not. And then again, when I finished Realms of the Wild, like, I had most of the party in tears at the end because they were so not only attached to their characters, but the story that we were telling and the world that we had created. So when I say I understand world building and how to tell really good stories, that's what I'm referring to. And I'm going to tell you right now, I've written some pretty amazing, interesting stories. I think the plot that I had for Realms of the Wild is probably one of my favorite plots that I've ever had a chance to explore. And it's an idea I had when I was a young kid that I always wanted to see explored in the Legend of Zelda series. It never was, and so I finally got to tell it. But the thing that made this story so amazing and so epic is I created an overall plot arc. The world got sundered into 3 different realities because of a certain event. And the results of everything going forward are a direct cause of one of the people involved in that beginning event. And throughout the 5.5-year campaign, I lay these little hints that there's a connection. And when I got to the end, I was able to show that connection, and the players really enjoyed it. However, the things that were the most impactful in that campaign were not the parts of the story that I wrote. They were the parts of the story that the players wrote. One of the player, or two of the player characters were Sheikah. And one of the things we kind of wrote into the world that they both came from was Sheikah were feared in Breath of the Wild. The Sheikah, the reason that they kind of went into hiding is everyone was afraid of them. When one of the realities, we took that to an extreme to where Sheikah weren't just feared, Sheikah were illegal. And there was a group called Shadow Stalkers that their entire existence was made on finding Sheikah, hunting them down, because Sheikahs were referred to as shadows and blood eyes, because they had red eyes, were the derogatory terms used for them. And these people would go around, they would hunt, sometimes kill, but more often than not would capture these Sheikahs, bring them to town where they would be tortured and then killed. Very Spanish Inquisition-esque. And so two of the characters had this as part of their backstory, having to hide their heritage and all these things. And in the final episode, they basically got to rewrite history a little bit and rewrite reality. And one of the things that they were able to do was, instead of everybody being terrified of the Sheikah because of the just massive amount of power that the Sheikah had, everybody learned that in the worst night in Hyrulean history, the Great Calamity, where Ganon won, everybody found out that the Sheikah weren't hiding, the Sheikah weren't running away. They were laying down their lives to protect everybody else in existence. And it got recorded in history that the Sheikah were the ones that stepped forward and went, no, we're going to protect, we are going to give our lives for everybody else to make them safe. And one of my players in particular, like, had tears streaming down her face because she had grown so attached to this character, and it had become, there had been links to her own dealing with kind of discrimination and things like that. And so this one instance was basically her being able to overcome discrimination and all this stuff, and her character finally getting to acknowledge that the thing that she had been forced to hide her entire life was not dirty, was not disgusting, was not wrong. It was heroic. It was legendary. None of that was things that I wrote. And if I had tried to tell that story, it wouldn't have come out that good. But I have very extremely talented players that are very creative, and I work with them to create compelling plots and things like that. So, bringing this back to tabletop, don't get attached to your story. Because this is going to sound, there's no way for me to say this without sounding incredibly arrogant. I'm probably a better writer than you. Not going to say everybody, but I'm really damn good at what I do. And I can tell you, nothing I have ever written has ever been half as good as the things that come together because I trust my players and I trust their creativity, and I encourage them to get invested in their characters, to get invested in the world, and I encourage them to help me create it. The cooperative, creative aspects of these games are the ones that have been the most rewarding over and over and over again. So I don't care how amazing the story you think it is. Go ahead and make that an overarching plot, but understand the best story that you're going to tell is going to be the one that the players tell, with their actions, with their choices, and with their investments in this story. 100% of the time, every single time. And again, I've written some really cool stuff. It always pales to what my players come up with every single time. So yeah, I hope this has inspired some kind of conversation. Anyway, it's all for me today. See you guys tomorrow. All right. Bye-bye.